Welcome back. This is Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. We're going to get right back in to the assassination of General George S. Patton. There's another reason why Patton had to go. Because he was pissed. Him and the Third Army tried to liberate a bunch of American POWs. And they had, earlier in the war, and they had liberated some. Some had been captured again. But they knew where some of these camps were. And remember, the Americans were forbidden from going into Berlin. We had to let the Soviets have it. Well, a lot of these German camps that had been overrun by the Soviets held American and British POWs. And not many people know this. This is a little known secret, but a fact. You can go look it up. I'm going to read right from Wilcox's book, page 355, in case anybody gets it and wants to know where I'm getting this from. Thousands of American and European soldiers who were POWs when the Russians overran their camps never returned home. John M.G. Brown, a former Vietnam War combat infantryman, has been studying the matter since the 1980s. In a two-part series of articles that appeared in The New American in 1990, he detailed a secret decision that is still largely hidden today. Roosevelt, Truman, and Marshall, to avoid a 1945 military confrontation with Stalin over the thousands of American, British, and Commonwealth POWs under Soviet control, decided not to press Russia to return the Allied POWs because and this is in quotes, Soviet participation in the United Nations and entrance into the Japanese war were seen as more important. So they didn't want to piss off Stalin because, remember, they hadn't dropped nukes on the Japs yet. The original plan was for us to invade mainland Japan, and they wanted Russia on board with them to help out. Russia's very close to Japan. It's not that far away. Patton, according to Brown, was one of those who protested the decision. See, Patton knew about it, in secret because of its classification. So he knew it was classified, and he couldn't run around screaming, but he did protest it as much as he could. One of the reasons he was sent back to the U.S. in the summer of 1945, writes Brown, was to separate him from the policies that would leave so many in bondage for fear he would blow a whistle. So they were afraid that Patton was going to open his mouth, and they sent him home in the summer of 45 for a little while. And that was actually the last time he was on American soil, the last time he saw his family. As a result of the cruel policy, many of the abandoned POWs spent the rest of their lives in the gulags working as slave labor for the USSR. Imagine that. Prisoners of war, American veterans, soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors, taken prisoner and kept forever. They thought they were going to fight the Nazis. And here they end up in a Soviet prison camp, and their country forgets all about them. And these generals, one of whom would later become the president, knew all about it. So don't ever think that Eisenhower's a good guy. I don't. I understand the truth about Ike. Maybe that's why he looked so sullen when he was older, because he realized what he had done, and he realized that in his older years he had sold his soul. The whole crisis about the American and British POWs were kept from the American people. And a classified memo from 1945 states that an estimated 20,000 American troops and 20,000 British troops, prisoners of war, remained in Soviet hands. And they left them to rot as slave labor because we didn't want to make the Soviets angry. Now, Patton's Third Army had identified a ton of them. And they were going to, they wanted to go in. In fact, the Soviets, the games that they played, out front were, they didn't want to really they temporarily kind of admitted that these POWs were there. But they refused U.S. and British forces entry into the camps. And then they just said that the prisoners of war were never there. But they knew they were. And so did Patton, Marshall, the creator of the Marshall Plan. And by the way, I made a mistake. I said KGB. It's not KGB. The KGB wasn't around yet. Back then it was called the Soviet NKVD, which was just as bad, if not worse, than the things the KGB did. And before, when I was talking about Patton coming home in the summer of 45, and I said that he told his family that he wasn't going to be coming back, I'll quote right from the book again, page 336. Before he returned to Germany, Patton, waiting until his wife had left the room, told his two daughters, Bea and Ruth Ellen, that he would not see them ever again. And I said, what are you talking about? The war is over. You'll be home in a few months for good. No, he retorted. My luck has all run out. I've used it up, like money in the bank. I've had increasingly narrow escapes. It's too damn bad I wasn't killed before the fighting stopped. But I wasn't, so be it. Because remember, Patton was ever the warrior. And like the Spartans, Patton would have rather have died, and real warriors would rather die in battle than die in a car accident. And he had always told them that he would die on foreign soil, but this was a very specific thing. He said he was never going to be returning home. He was going to die when he returned to Germany. Now, he kind of probably had a foreknowledge that they were out to get him. There was a couple, when you read through the book, you'll see there was a couple accidents. There were multiple, I'm doing air quotes, accidents that happened. He actually had another car accident a couple days before. And it's just ridiculous. It also turns out that we had turned over to the French several 100,000 prisoners of war, and they were used as slave labor in France. And it's just amazing how people think that slavery consists only of colored people being, rounded up. And I'm not picking on anybody that was. Hundreds of years ago, that was horrible what was done, and there's no justification for that. But it still goes on today, is what I'm trying to say. So don't think that, Abe Lincoln ended slavery just because they're not rounding up people of one color. Now they just get the low-income people to join the military, and you're a slave for the military. And then when you get sent off to a foreign country and captured by their military and used as slave labor, they don't care. They just don't care. You're expendable. You're just a number. Maybe all the police should, any police and military should read this book, or at least go check out that little side caveat by itself about how Patton and the rest of them, or not, I shouldn't say Patton because he didn't allow it, how Truman and Marshall and Eisenhower, I mean, they allowed these people to die. These are American soldiers, people's brothers, sisters. There's people still alive today that probably knew some of these people. I know it was 60 years ago. I know it was a long time, but still, how about my grandfather never came home from the war. Yeah, he died fighting the Germans. Yeah, he didn't die fighting the Germans. How would you like to find out your grandfather was in a Soviet gulag for 10 years as slave labor? It'd probably piss you off, wouldn't it? I know it pisses me off as a veteran. Gets me all fired up. Listen to me. But they did it because they needed it. They wanted him, they didn't want they wanted him, Stalin and the rest of the Soviets, they wanted them on their side. So they didn't rock the boat. They didn't want to piss them off. Unforgivable. We're going to break. We'll be right back. Check out the book. It's called Target Patton by Robert K. Wilcox. You can find it on Amazon. Go check it out.
The reasons for the cover-up, the reasons for the censorship. Now I realize that Uncle Sam was not befriending me. He was only using me to be friends with the enemy. A presidential terrorist, ain't that a contradiction? I guess it goes to show the truth is stranger than fiction. But they don't even show the truth when soldiers are missing. I'm only trying to show the truth.